Someone says no. They choose someone else. They don't text back. They leave. And somehow it feels like more than disappointment. It feels personal. If rejection hits you harder than it seems to hit everyone else, there may be a reason you've been carrying this pain for much longer than you realize. Because here's the truth. For some people, rejection is simply an unpleasant experience. For others, rejection feels like proof. Proof that they're not good enough, not lovable enough, not important enough, not worthy enough. And when rejection starts feeling like proof instead of an experience, that's when it becomes difficult to move on. Maybe you've experienced this. Someone pulls away. A relationship ends. A friend stops reaching out. You don't get chosen. You don't get the job. You don't get the invitation. And suddenly your mind starts asking questions. What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? Notice how quickly the focus shifts. The rejection happens outside of you, but the pain immediately turns inward. And that's where many people get stuck. Because the rejection itself lasts a moment, but the story we attach to it can last for years. The event ends, the meaning remains. And often it's the meaning that hurts the most. The reality is that rejection touches one of our deepest human needs. The need to belong. The need to be accepted. The need to feel valued and connected. Thousands of years ago, being rejected from your tribe could mean danger. Isolation could threaten survival. Connection meant safety. Belonging meant protection. And while the world has changed, our emotional wiring still carries some of those ancient instincts. That's why rejection doesn't simply feel disappointing. It can feel threatening. It can feel like your nervous system is sounding an alarm, as if something important is at risk. But here's where things get even deeper. For many people, the intensity of rejection today isn't only about today. It's connected to experiences that happened long before this moment. Think about it. If you grew up feeling unseen, if love felt conditional, if approval had to be earned, if you experienced criticism, neglect, abandonment, or emotional inconsistency, your mind may have learned something very early. It may have learned that acceptance isn't guaranteed. It may have learned that being loved requires performance. It may have learned that losing connection is dangerous. And when those beliefs take root, every rejection starts feeling bigger than it really is. Because your mind isn't just reacting to the present, it's reacting to the past. A person doesn't text back. And suddenly you're not just dealing with a delayed response. You're dealing with every moment you've ever felt ignored. A relationship ends, and suddenly you're not just grieving that person. You're grieving every experience of abandonment you've ever carried. This is why rejection can feel overwhelming. The present moment wakes up old wounds, and those wounds start speaking. They say things like, "See, you're not enough. See, people always leave. See, nobody really chooses you." But here's something important to understand. Just because rejection triggers a belief doesn't make that belief true. Let's say someone chooses another person over you. Painful, absolutely. But does it mean you're unworthy? No. Let's say someone doesn't return your feelings. Does it hurt? Of course. But does it mean you're unlovable? No. Let's say you don't get the opportunity you wanted. Does that feel disappointing? Yes. But does it define your value? Not even close. The problem is that many of us confuse rejection with identity. We think, I was rejected, therefore I am not enough. But those are two very different things. Rejection is an event. Worth is not. Rejection is an experience. Worth is not. Rejection is something that happens. Worth is something you already possess. And when we forget that, we start giving other people the power to decide how we feel about ourselves. One person's opinion becomes our self-worth. One person's choice becomes our identity. One person's departure becomes our definition. And that's a burden no relationship was ever meant to carry. So how do we begin healing this? It starts with asking a different question. Instead of asking, "Why was I rejected?" try asking, "What story am I telling myself about this rejection?" That question changes everything, because often the story is where the suffering lives. Maybe the story is, "I'm not lovable." Maybe it's, "I'll always be left behind." Maybe it's, "No one ever chooses me." And when you identify the story, you can finally challenge it. You can ask, is this fact, or is this fear? Is this truth, or is this an old wound speaking? Because many of the beliefs rejection awakens were never true in the first place. They were simply conclusions we formed while trying to make sense of pain. And healing begins when we stop treating those conclusions as facts. One of the most powerful things you can learn is this: rejection doesn't tell you who you are. It tells you what wasn't aligned. Sometimes people leave because they're unable to meet you where you are. Sometimes opportunities close because they're not meant for your path. Sometimes doors shut because different doors are waiting to open. That doesn't mean rejection feels good. It doesn't. But it does mean rejection doesn't have to become your identity. The goal isn't to never feel hurt. The goal is to stop turning pain into self-condemnation. To stop measuring your worth by other people's choices. To stop believing that every rejection is evidence that something is wrong with you. Because often, the deepest healing happens when you realize this. The rejection was real, but the story you built around it doesn't have to be. And maybe that's the lesson many of us spend years learning. You can be rejected and still be worthy. You can be left and still be lovable. You can be overlooked and still be valuable. You can experience loss and still remain whole. Because your worth was never supposed to depend on who stayed, or who chose you, or who said yes. Your worth existed long before any rejection ever arrived, and it will remain long after. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the Peace Path, because understanding why we think, feel, and react the way we do is often the first step toward finding lasting peace.